Welcome to the One Stiletto in the Grave podcast with your hosts, Sunny Ormonde and Jane James.
Well, hello everyone. We're feeling a little tipsy today. Drunk on memories of public houses, bottoms up, public car parks, Ringo, and public loos. Ooh, I feel a little flushed. And such a convenience as Dorothy drops in with a tale or two. Sunny shares her phone and loose change frustrations, and Janie relives children parties and bubble machine mayhem. Shall we pass the parcel? No, just pass the gin. Today's podcast is sponsored by MTL Associates. Would you like a website but don't know where to start? Could your business do with that bit extra? It's less than you think. MTL Associates produces websites for people like you. They'll agree a fixed price for their work, starting from £50 for a 5-page website using one of their templates. And after that, it can be as little as £14 a month. MTL Associates. It's you, but online. Do you know, I was thinking about pubs the other day. Ho, 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 very typical for Lillian, isn't it, in G&Ts? But it was to do with the fact that I did my one-woman show in Oxfordshire the other week and actually stayed overnight and stayed in one of the local pubs there. And it was really lovely because after the show, you know, we were able to sit and have a drink. And I was watching everyone in the pub and I thought how social and sociable all this is and how lovely it must be to have a local pub. And then that got me thinking just generally about pubs and things like the Bull, I suppose, in the Archers and what it means to people.
It's really big, isn't it, in the life of the village? It's so interesting what you say about a local, because I don't think I've ever really had a local apart from one that I worked in. But it's very clear that in Ambridge, that's where pretty much everything social happens, isn't it? Apart from the really posh stuff,
Yeah.
the hunt balls and so on. But it seems to be very much the centre of life at the village. And do you remember when, well, you will remember because you're essential to it. I think Lillian wanted to change the name, didn't she?
Absolutely.
To something a bit
It
weird.
Yes, it was the bee at Ambridge. It's what she wanted. And I remember when the script actually fell through the letterbox with this, and I thought, am I talking about a buzzing bee? And I remember saying that to the producer. Am I supposed to go, the bee bzz at Ambridge? I mean, that was the play on it. But yeah, that's what she wanted to do, change it to the bee at Ambridge. And of course, then Linda got very hot and bothered about it, as did other people in the village, quite rightly. And she tied herself to the Bull side, didn't she? To try and stop us. But and I can understand, in a village, if something like that happened, a pub that has been there for centuries and somebody wants to come in, which of course does happen, doesn't it, with sort of bistro pubs and things like that, and they want to change the name. And it's a crucial part of the history of the village, isn't it?
Well, it is, and it's, there were 2 pubs once, weren't there, because it was the Cat and Fiddle.
Oh, was there? Now I'd always assumed that it was just the Bull, but you're right. You've got a lot of Archers history there, Jamie.
Well, I may be wrong because it may not have been in Ambridge. It seemed to float as many buildings in Ambridge do. They sort of relocate in a very Hogwartian kind of way.
Yes.
But yes, there was the gay publican Sean, wasn't there, and his partner Peter, I want to say, but I don't know if that's true or not. They ran the Cat and Fiddle. And Sid Perks, who was running the Bull at the time, was very homophobic and wouldn't have Sean in the cricket team, as I remember.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh,
and Eddie Grundy used to drink at the Cat and Fiddle, but one got the impression it was more of it wasn't for the Brian Aldridges.
Right.
And the Jennifer Aldridges. It was more for the Eddie Grundys and the Fat Pauls.
A tap bar or something like that.
Maybe something like that. Maybe.
Yeah, I wonder if they served Shires. Well, they must have done at the Cat and Fiddle if you went there, because I mean, Shires is his favourite tipple, isn't it? Dear?
Yeah.
Old Eddie Grundy. But I was because Lillian herself, she has a 51% share in the Bull.
In the Bull, of course.
Which it's a little bit of a history. It all came about because Peggy and Jack, who were Lillian's parents, originally they were sort of the leasees of the Bull. Then they bought it. I think it was in about the 60s or something like that. And then when Jack died, Peggy found that she, it was a bit too much for her to run the pub. So that's when she
Right.
got Sid into the pub to
Ah,
help her. And of course, that was Polly Perks, who subsequently, I think she died, didn't she, Polly? And then
she did.
Kathy came in to help out. Then he subsequently married Kathy. But apparently, when Kathy was divorced, in order for them to be able to pay the divorce settlement, they asked Guy Pemberton at the time, who was Caroline Pemberton's, now Caroline, who became Caroline Sterling's partner, husband, if he would buy out part of the bull so that they could pay the settlement. So that's what happened. And I think she got 51% at the time. And then eventually she in turn wanted to buy Grey Gables. And that's when Lillian then bought the 51% share
Right,
in
of course.
the pub, which is quite interesting. And then and of course Sid then left it to Jeline, and the rest is history. But it was quite interesting just looking back over the history of the pub and how it came that Lillian does have 51% share in it.
It's not
So
changed hands for a village pub. It hasn't changed hands very often, has it, over that
mm,
period of time?
no,
Because
because I think Jack and Peggy were at the Bull in somewhere like, I think it was 1959. I think there was a chap called, this is my research, you'll be impressed, listeners and Janie. There was a chap called Sam Sanders, apparently, who originally owned the Bull, and he was
oh,
there for 20 years. And it was him that then gave the pub, or didn't give it, but obviously Jack and Peggy became the
ah.
owners eventually of the pub. Interesting, eh?
I,
Interesting. Because
I cannot imagine Peggy as a barmaid. Can you? I suppose she might have been very much in the same um, type as Annie Walker in
yes,
Coronation Street.
definitely,
A
definitely.
sort of
And of course,
very
she had a lot to contend with, of course, because not forgetting that Jack, husband Jack,
oh,
Lillian's father, was an
it's
alcoholic.
alcoholic running a
You
pub.
know,
Yeah,
so that must have been quite tricky, I think. And
yeah, definitely, definitely. But yes, I just can't imagine. I just can't imagine it. I can't imagine it being hospitable behind the bar
yeah, yeah,
at
yeah,
all.
yeah, 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 yeah.
If you worked in a pub?
Yes, when I was a student,
Oh, me too.
have you? Have you? Did
Yeah,
you?
yeah.
Mm.
It's a funny
Yes.
thing to do, isn't it?
Very, very odd. And of course, I do remember the pubs that I worked in. Maths is not my strong point, Janie, at
Ah,
all. And of course, you had to add everything up in your head. Well,
definitely.
for me, that was a living nightmare, quite frankly. And the other issue I had, because I'm quite small, was that I could never reach up to get the
Yeah,
glasses and the optics
yeah.
and all that. I didn't find it the most relaxing experience, I have to
No,
say. But yeah, it's an odd experience. You're quite right,
yeah.
and it was all a bit sexist as well in those
Oh God, it
days,
was awful,
wasn't it?
especially as we are both of the big bosomed variety.
Absolutely.
There, oh, God,
Indeed.
I just used
Indeed.
to
Yeah.
cringe at the things people said, and
I
yet all
know.
that adding up in your head, and people would come and buy these enormous rounds,
Yeah.
and then they'd go, "But last time you said it was this," and
Yeah.
it'd be like 2p difference or something.
I know.
Um,
I know.
yeah, so
But and also it was
they
old
knew.
money. I can remember, I was
Oh
doing it was
yeah,
like
yeah,
3
of
and
course.
6 and 2 and 5 pence, and, I mean, it was horrendous. And I'm sure I must have got it wrong on endless occasions. But nobody ever sort of hauled me over the over the coals about it. But
I
I
think.
must say things improved when I went to work at Marks and Spencer's sometime later, Janie, because
Oh,
the till that they had there did it all for me. They
oh, I
could tell me
say.
exactly what changed. Yeah, life was different
Oh,
then.
I didn't know you'd worked at Marks and Spencer's. That's like the royalty of
Yeah,
shopping jobs, isn't it?
yeah.
The pub that I worked at was just over the road from where my parents lived, so it was handy in that I just had to kind of fall out of the house and I was there. But the thing I
Mm.
didn't like about it is that people at the pub knew where I lived,
Ah,
and
yes,
I
yes.
didn't like that. And I remember being involved in a fight once. Well, not me personally, but the chap I was going out with at the time got a bit shirty because the guys were taking a long time to drink up,
Mm,
and he knew that I wanted to get home, and so
mm,
he's just said, she's waiting to get home, quite politely, but yeah, a little group of them took that very
mm,
badly and beat him up in the
mm.
car park.
Oh dear, that's horrid.
Yeah, it
But
was.
yes, I can understand why you would be anxious with all that, with living quite
Mm,
close by,
yeah,
actually. Um, and
yeah.
of course, it is interesting, isn't it, that the pubs generally, particularly in villages, are really the hub of the community, and particularly these days. I mean, a lot of villages don't even have local pubs anymore. They used to have three or four, but
Yeah.
publicans have had to sell up. Um, and In fact, something that I read about pubs, but I think it was somebody was doing some research in about 2018 and said actually that those villages that did have a pub, I mean, these are rural villages, um, you know, loneliness
Mm.
was very little in the village, and but those villages that they found didn't have pubs anymore had increased in mental illness and also in alcoholism. They found that if there was a pub, that people were more able to control their drinking. It was quite an interesting little
Yeah,
survey that I
it is,
read,
isn't it?
but I can see that really,
Yeah,
and the
yeah.
loneliness and
There was a woman when I worked in the pub, donkeys years ago, obviously. There was a woman who used to come in, what I thought of as a very old woman. She was probably
mm,
my age or younger, but she'd come in every day, round about 11:30, and she'd have a gin in it,
mm,
and she would sit there, usually at the same table, and sort
mm,
of sip her gin in it, and then she'd go home. But
mm,
I just figured, well, that was probably her trip out, and she really stuck in my mind because she was a woman who went into the pub on her own, which I think
mm,
now, at my advanced age of even 70, I I hate going into a pub on my own.
mm,
So even if I'm meeting people there,
mm,
which I do occasionally, it's one time when I tend to get somewhere late because I just don't like going into a pub on my own.
mm, mm,
Do you?
mm.
Is that just
No,
me
yeah,
being a
no,
wet?
I get that completely. I think it is. It's sort of a hangover. I think, isn't it, from the past? And when you think about rural pubs, and I think about because around here, although I live in a town, I mean, there are lots of villages, and going into rural pubs, you often see the chaps, they're older chaps, don't you, sitting propping up the bar on the bar stools and having their pints and having a little chat with the barman or bar girl or what have you, and then other people come in and say, "Hey, oh, hello, Joe, how are you?" And you
Mm.
can tell that, as you say, that's they're socializing for the day. It's part of their community, isn't it? Part of their family, I suppose. I think.
That's rather nice, isn't it?
Mm,
I think somebody told me, and I don't know if this is true or not, that when one of the things about All Bar One, the All Bar One chain,
yeah.
that when they started those, that they wanted to make it a place that women would feel okay to go into. So one of the things they did was to put in clear glass windows so that you could look in and see it was okay. Because I think one of the things about walking in somewhere that you don't know like that is you don't know until you open the door what's going to be on the other side of it, do you?
Mm, absolutely, absolutely, and I do think it's a hangover, to those times when you'd walked in pubs, and of course people could be quite jolly because they've had a few
Yeah.
drinks, and there will be that of that, oh hello, how are you, love, and all that. I
Oh,
do
yeah,
think
yeah, yeah.
a hangover from that, and not quite know what you're going to enter into, and
Yeah.
the sound and the shout, if they're shouting or something. But no, I think that's a brilliant idea, the clear windows, and then you know what you're
Yeah.
walking into, what the scenario is ahead of you.
And they
Um,
are more family friendly now. So our producer, who is not as old as us,
mm,
was just asking about, whether we took our kids into pubs.
mm,
But
mm.
you weren't allowed to, were you?
No,
I mean,
no,
kids were not allowed in pubs. I think
no.
from 14, they were allowed into a pub if they were sort of have a sit down meal in a
Mm,
restaurant thing. But
mm,
yeah,
mm.
absolutely, we're not allowed into a pub.
No, no,
Not even to drink lemonade or anything. You were
no.
just not allowed it. We all went into pubs. Obviously, there were. I remember when I was kind of 15, 16, there were pubs
Mm,
where they just didn't give a toss how old you were and never checked your ID.
mm,
So we would gather in those.
mm.
But you weren't. It was illegal, wasn't it?
It was that going into pubs, and I do remember my that there was sort of 9 years between myself and my and my one of my brothers, and I can remember when my mother had him, I wasn't allowed in the hospital. I couldn't go in and see
Oh,
my mum or my brother. So rules about going into hospitals
yeah.
for young children, and rules about pubs, quite interesting, because I mean it wouldn't happen now, would it?
No.
You'd all be in there at the mum's
Oh,
bedside.
no, you're
So I
absolutely
do
right.
remember that.
You're absolutely
When we
right.
not allowed in, can't go
No.
in, you're in
I mean,
charge.
I was 3 when my sister was born, and my mother was in hospital for quite a while. And
Mm.
apparently, I didn't know this, but she told me afterwards that I thought she was dead.
Oh. Oh, yeah.
which is
Well, yeah.
just weird, isn't it? But
Yeah.
yeah, not allowed in.
Yeah. Oh, Janie, that's horrid, actually. Yeah, but no, you weren't, and so pub's the same. Yeah, you're right. And I can remember a dear friend of ours saying he remembered. I think his mum and dad used to go to the pub quite a lot. Just because they enjoyed it. I think it was a rural thing, and he said he can remember he and his sister, sitting in the back of the car, the A40 or whatever it was, with a packet of crisp and a lemonade, whilst mum and dad went to the pub. And it wasn't cruel in any way. I mean, that's what people did. That's what you did. And
Yeah,
you could keep your eye on your kids. You could see what was going on. Or you could sit outside with them, couldn't you? But I think,
I think so. I'm not even sure about
no,
that. I
no, no,
really
I'm not
don't
even
know.
sure about that either, actually, Janie. You probably couldn't. Nowhere on the premises, probably.
And speaking of premises, I think it's time we went over to Dorothy's flat in Knutsford.
Now, those of you who've heard episode 1 will remember that we introduced Dorothy into our podcast. She's a forthright woman of a certain age, and here's a clip from her latest podcast talking about her friend Monica and her disappointments in love. Now, Monica and I have known each other since primary school. We were friends from the get-go. Weren't we, Monica? Well, she lived in the next road, and we walked to school together. And we sat next to each other in class, and we played together. We shared our sweet ration. She had my sherbet, and I had her licorice. And then, when we got to the top class, we sat the 11 plus. And when the results came through, I'd got into the grammar and she was off to the secondary modern. Well, after that, we lost touch, and that might have been it if she hadn't got sweet on my brother Bob. Ooh, they made a lovely couple, perfectly matched. Everybody said so. They were that much in love. It almost radiated from them. Right up to the time he dropped her for that Patsy from the butchers in Bake-Up. Oh, I rue the day I introduced them. Really, I do. But you see, her pies were prize winners, and Bob never could resist a bit of pork jelly. But we stayed friends. And I like to think that I helped her through the pain. And when I slipped a load of laxatives into Bob and Patsy's wedding cake, we felt that honour had been satisfied. Well, even when I was courting our Jack, I didn't forget Monica. Well, she was my bridesmaid when we were wed, and she even went on honeymoon with me. Well, I had my heart set on the Isle of Wight, and Jack didn't fancy the ferry, so he stayed home and decorated the toilet. Oh, and we had a lovely fortnight. Didn't we, Mum? We did. Oh, they say that your honeymoon is a special time, and it was. But wasn't it, Monica? Yes, it was. We sat on the beach, had afternoon tea at the Royal Hotel. Oh, it was wonderful. She never got over Bob. I always hoped they'd get back together when he got tired of pork pie Patsy, but, well, they've just had their golden wedding, so that's not going to happen now. And to be fair, he's not such a catch now his teeth fall out every time he sneezes.
Oh, poor Bob. You get the feeling that Dorothy's given him quite a hard time about breaking up with Monica for the last 50 years.
Yeah, I bet she has. And going back to what we were talking about earlier, I can't imagine Dorothy in a pub putting up with all the noise and banter and leery men who are all 1 over the 8. She'd be putting them all straight.
Talking about pubs makes me think about toilets, actually, because
really?
I did go out to a cafe the other day, and
Yes.
it reminded me that I must be getting very old, because
Right.
I kind of need a manual every time I go to a public loo these days. Is it just me? Because, first of all, do I waft my hands around to flush, or do I press something? That is never very clear. And I don't like the ones that when you just move your bum a bit, they flush when you're not expecting it. That's never a pleasant
No, that's
experience, is it? That I don't like being taken by surprise in that area.
It's a bit chilly for one thing, isn't it?
It certainly is.
Pump a rush of water up your jacksie. It's not
That's
quite
right.
what you
It's not.
want.
It's not what I like. And then I often don't know how to get to the toilet paper because they've got new and different ways now of making that appear. So I generally make sure I've got a packet of tissues in my pocket just in case. But don't use the balsam ones, which I've done.
A bit stingy.
Oh, a bit stingy. And then there's the whole thing with the hand basins and the soap.
Yes.
Do you get this? So do I twist the tap? Do I waft my hands under the tap? Is there some button to press for the...
I know.
Is it just me? Am I too stupid to be able to
No, you're not stupid
have a
at all.
whittle and wash my hands in
No.
public?
No, it's not. It's a stressful experience, if you ask me, having a whittle in a public toilet. It really is. You're quite right. And then, of course, if you got through the trauma of actually being on the toilet and having your jacksie,
Irrigated.
it's quite, you get to the point, right, I must wash my hands. And then, as you say, you're waving your hands under. But of course, when they've broken down, you can be standing there for half an hour waving your hands and nothing happens.
Yeah.
But I tell you what I find more tricky with the public toilets is also when you have to pay now, don't you? And a lot of public toilets.
Do you?
Oh gosh, have you not experienced that?
I have not.
Oh yes, you can get to public toilets and before they let you in, you have to put money in and then a little gate opens and then you can go in. Well, if you're caught short, you're in a terrible state, and particularly post-COVID, because who has loose change in their pockets anymore? Very few people.
No, I
We
don't.
experienced this quite recently because we were down in Devon a few weeks ago now. But yes, and one of my party was caught short, and we couldn't get in, and I had to. Unfortunately, there was a lavatory attendant. Lavatory, I love that word. Lavatory attendant. It's a good word, isn't it? Lavatory attendant close by happened to come out of their little sort of office door, and I said, "We've got to get in here. My friend is there's going to be a puddle on the floor, if you know." And they let us in, but we didn't have the change. We just did not have the change to get in. And if you're in London at some railway station, it's terribly expensive to get in the toilet.
It used to be. I mean, I haven't been to a big mainline station for quite some time, but I know Marylebone used to be 50p or something. It's like you need to think fairly carefully. Can I wait and do it on the train for free?
50p a p.
Although then doing it on the train for free, I have been caught out by the Virgin trains with the doors that you press the wrong button and then you're suddenly whittling in displaying everything to anyone who might be waiting outside. Actually, 50p is cheap at the price to avoid that particular humiliation, I think.
It is.
But yeah, it's the thing of not having change as well, as you say, because if you can't do it contactless.
Yeah. And you can't. I mean, you just couldn't. I mean, this experience that we just had was complete madness.
That's horrific. Was it in a station or something, or
No, it was sort of in a little park area, which was it was right in the centre of the town, so it wasn't a big park, But I mean, it was adjacent to the, everybody was using it. It wasn't like it was stuck in the middle of nowhere. Everybody was using it, and but it, just going on from public toilets, same in car parks a lot now. I'm finding, and that you haven't got change, and some of them, and particularly again where we were on holiday, I don't know, it was in the West Country, you couldn't pay with cards. It was still money, and it was just horrendous. And then of course some of them do that Ringo thing, don't they, where you can use your mobile phone. Well, I've tried that and you can't get through to people, and it's just a complete nightmare. Press this, put that in, hopeless, and I get very cross when I go near to the mailbox, because where I record the Archers, because I don't always park in the car park underneath the mailbox. There are parking meters outside. If I'm there for a short period of time, maximum time you can be there is 4 hours, and sometimes that's fine, and it's cheaper, I have to say, there. But we should have the choice of either putting money into the meter, or indeed you could pay by mobile phone. But what they've started to do recently, that they have in some way prevented you from putting the coinage into the actual meter. And it still says on the signs, you can pay by coins, or you can pay by mobile phone. And to me, that's the Trade Description Act is wrong, because they will not let you do it. And it's not like just 1 meter that's not working. They've obviously done something to, there must be a bunch of about 10 meters. I mean, sometimes I've run between the meters.
God bless you.
And I just think that's pretty poor.
Absolutely. Write a letter of complaint. That's not on.
No, it's not on.
I've got half a dozen different parking apps on my phone. And So yeah, the first thing is trying to figure out which one I use for this. But generally, most places I park now, I just do it all on the phone on one of the apps.
And I think it's okay if you've set an app up, Janie, because you
Hmm.
should be able to do it really quickly.
Yeah.
But
Oh,
if
you're
you
just
haven't,
phoning at the number.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it just takes forever. And if you're late, if you're running a bit late
Yeah.
and you've anticipated, you've got your coinage, you know how much it's going to be, you want to
Uh,
put it in, take you, just a minute and then but you can't. And it takes at least 5 or 6 minutes. And I just don't think that's right because you've come
no,
prepared for one thing. And
and they've
actually,
changed it.
yeah,
Well,
mm,
yeah, no,
I
that's
think a
that's not
letter.
on. And
No, I don't think it's
I
on.
think you need to do a letter because I think it's also you're better off with an app because let's
Yes, you
face
should.
it, if you're in an underground car park trying to make a phone call to somebody to pay, it's like, well,
Mm,
you're not going to get a signal, are you?
no, no.
It's,
The world's gone mad, if you ask me. And I
well,
can tell you, I've got another little complaint.
have you? Complain
Yes, I
away.
have. It's similar, really. I had to go for just an eye checkup the other day, and I found myself having taken a friend to a hospital for an appointment. Should have had loads of time to get back for my appointment, which was in a clinic, a separate clinic. But for various reasons, I thought, I'm not going to make this appointment. So I looked on the letter that I'd got and I thought, well, I'll just ring them to warn them that, there may be an issue. No telephone number, no telephone number at all. So then I got onto the website. It was a website. It took me quite a long time. And I discovered that, but yeah, there was this number for the
Mm.
Coventry area, big long number. So anyway, I rang it. I was 15th in the queue, right?
Uh,
I was on the, and in the end I gave up because all the time I'm still waiting for the friend. So I then go back, find a website, and it says, "Oh, you could have a chat on the website." So I think, right, we'll try this. So there I am, pinging all this in, talking to Viola or whatever her name is, or having a chat. And I explained my situation, and I said, all I need is a number for this clinic so that I can ring them just in case I can't get there, so they know what's happening. So then she comes back to me about a minute later. Oh no, sorry, I'm giving her personality here. Oh no, sorry, you can't do that. It's just got to be that long number. So I then said, well, look, hang on a minute. If I'm suddenly in a situation where I possibly could get back, I've got 20 minutes to spare, I could get back, but you're telling me that I've got to hang on the phone and be the 15th caller. By the time I do that, I'm certainly not going to be at the appointment. Oh, well, there's nothing else that you can do. I mean, what an inefficient system. Why couldn't there just even be an answer phone message at the clinic so at least these people would know if you didn't turn up what had happened to you? And it's just you can't speak to people anymore. And that drives
no,
me bonkers.
no,
Sorry.
I do get cross. I know somebody's been trying to navigate stuff with the Department for Work and Pensions uh, in receipt of a whole load of letters with no phone numbers, no email address,
Mhm.
and it's just like, why make things more difficult for us all?
And it is difficult.
Just a
What?
phone number, even
Yeah.
if the phone number just says we're not interested, f off. At least you've phoned somebody.
At least if and I mean that was my all I want to do is leave a message on an answer phone to say this is my situation. I may or may not get there. If I don't, you know why.
Yeah,
Rather than actually somebody just not turning up and they at the other end could have been waiting at the clinic for half an hour for this person that didn't. It's all that, isn't it? It's just inefficient. It's the whole thing is inefficient.
it's
Um,
bad and wrong.
bad
Bad and
and
wrong.
wrong.
Very
Bad and
bad and wrong. Very
yeah.
bad and
So
wrong.
um, there
Oh,
we
well,
are.
look, shall I cheer you up? Shall I tell you a
Yeah, go
funny
on.
story?
Oh, please.
Um, took my a few weeks back. We were looking after our 4-year-old grandson
Yeah.
on a Saturday, and he was invited to a kids' party.
Yeah.
So now I know, I'm beginning to think that the reason that his parents went out that day is because he'd been invited to a 4-year-old kids' party. Because it was, honestly, I mean, I've been to very loud concerts. I have seen heavy metal in my time, and this kids' party, 34-year-old kids, not 34-year-old kids, 30 times 4-year-old children, would they they could put up a bit of a fight against Hawkwind, I reckon, because my God, they were noisy. And there was some poor woman. So this is what happens, I suppose, if you don't get a job out of drama school. There she is. I can't remember what her character was, but she's in some sort of lycra all-in-one thing. God knows how she gets to go and have a whittle. With one of those, what do you call those headphone things that you used at Wantage, the ones that go into one ear?
Oh, yes. There
They
are.
use them at the Gap,
Yeah,
Anyway,
yeah.
so she needs that. She needs that to be heard over the 30 children. So
Really.
bless her, she does her best to have them running round and round and round. And she has a bubble machine. Well, so she puts that on occasion. The kids run round and round and round and try and break the bubbles, which is all good fun. Except that she disappears off to sort something out, and the kids, who are only 4, it takes them 30 seconds to figure out how to work the bubble machine. So they're like pressing the button, bubbles everywhere, which in itself, not problematic, except that you've now got a floor covered in bubble mix and kids running round and round in circles on a very, 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 what is now an extremely slippery floor. So it was absolute carnage. It really, really was. And this poor woman, my God, it's a hard
She was
way
all
to
on
live.
her own,
She was
dealing with
all on her
children.
own. Well, I mean, the
That,
parents and everything were there, but there were grown-ups there because the kids are too little to leave a party, I think, at that point. But we were all sort of like backed against the wall with our fingers in our ears. And she was on her own dealing with it all. So
she out
I'm
of her
sure
depth.
she coped with it remarkably well, but she must,
Yeah.
I mean, her hearing is going to be terrible when she gets older.
Yeah.
Doing that day after day, week after week.
Did they listen to her with her microphone on her head? I mean, was she having to sort of scream at them? And
No, she was talking loudly and forcefully, if you know what I mean.
right,
But it
right.
wasn't a big hall. It was a sort of church hall thing. So it wasn't enormous, but she did need a fair amount of volume to make an impression.
The image of these children all falling over on this,
It was,
hurting each other, crying as
I
well because
know,
they banged into each other
I
and
know,
hurt themselves.
And then the food was sort of laid out for when it was lunchtime, but a few wise children spotted it and sort of then added into the general mix of the dance floor bits of dropped sandwich and Baby Bell waxy bits from the outside of the Baby Bell cheese. So yeah, it was like a ruddy obstacle course. Our grandson, very, very sensibly, he had lunch. And then he said, Granny, this has been very good fun, but do you think I could go home now? I was like, yes, yes, you can.
He'd had enough.
He'd
Bless
had
his
enough. He
heart.
couldn't cope with another hour of it.
Oh, no, I can imagine.
Yeah,
Oh, dear.
children's entertainers.
And I mean, that's always the thing, isn't it, about children's parties? Well, you've got a full mix of
Oh,
personalities. You've got the children who don't like it, crying in the corner, and
yeah,
somebody bullying somebody else, and somebody pulling somebody else's hair, and
yeah,
oh, I know, you've got the full works there, haven't
you
you?
have. And the thing that's different, I don't know if you remember from when you were a mummy organising these parties, the thing that was different with this one is that it was the boys who were around the outside clinging to their parents and grandparents and sobbing at the racket, and the girls were in the middle, kind of, really feisty and up for it.
Well, you see, that's
Whereas it
it.
was entirely the other way round when my kids were younger.
Women's lib, darling. It starts very
Yeah,
early on.
it's
How
good, isn't it?
ma
Those girls will be in the pub
They
before
certainly
they're
will
old
be
enough to
running it.
drink, I'm sure.
They'll be running it. They'll be having the men behind the bar,
Yeah.
oh, how funny, how funny. Yes, I mean, I must say, I don't remember those little children's parties with great glee. I did find them really quite stressful, particularly when you were throwing the parties yourselves. I mean, we managed eventually, to, I don't know, get the magician in, or do the leisure centre party, give somebody else responsibility, like the poor girl, with the bubble, with the head mic on. But I didn't, and it's children who, they are all sorts of different personalities. Because they're not your child, it's very difficult to discipline them, because you don't want them to go home and say, "Oh,
I
such and
know.
such mum really shouted at me. She was horrible." But you did get those children,
Yes.
naughty children, just for devilment. They'd be
Yeah.
pouring orange squash over everything,
Yeah.
over people's heads, over sandwiches, over the floor.
Yeah.
You're trying to reprimand them, and they would just look at you and do more. I mean, it was, oh dear,
Yeah.
not a happy time. Not a happy time. I don't remember them with great glee. And somebody
No.
would always hurt themselves. There'd always be tears and
Yeah.
black eyes, and oh dear, no. I was glad when those days were over. It has to be said.
It was nice when they just used to sort of nick the booze from your cabinet and disappear off to the park, wasn't it?
Yes, that was far preferable. I tell you, one of the best parties, but they were a bit older then, I think, was the 10-pin bowling party. I do
Oh,
remember
that
being
was good.
a success. That was
Yeah.
quite good. Because
Yeah.
they are completely focused then, and
Yeah.
then they're herded away, to have
Yeah.
the tea and the pizza, or having then they're herded back again. No,
Yeah.
that was quite a successful party, I remember.
Mhm.
but it's so competitive. Well, I don't know. Maybe it isn't anymore. But I remember when a young mum. Did you find that
Very
it's all a
much
bit
so.
competitive?
Yeah.
You know.
Oh God,
Mm.
yes, yeah. And having to fill those ruddy party bags
Oh,
with
yes.
plastic towel is so bad for
Oh,
the environment. That's what I'd say now. I'm not doing party bags because it's so bad for the environment.
you'd be a right-on mum, wouldn't you?
Well,
Absolutely.
just so I wouldn't have to bother to do it.
No,
Um,
quite.
but yes, I
quite.
remember the kids used to bring back party bags full of. Nick and I just used to fight over the cake, and then the rest of it used to go in the bin.
Yes, that's right. Toys R Us was very, very good for
Oh, it
party bags.
was.
It was marvellous.
Yeah.
You could fill many a party bag from Toys R Us. Do they exist anymore, Toys R
No, no, they went down the
Us?
pan.
Oh, where do they go now? Where do the mothers go? I suppose they make them, don't they? Make
Oh,
everything themselves now
do you
because
think
they're
either
all
that?
right on, aren't they?
You
Well,
probably just buy them all from Amazon, don't you? I don't know.
yes, I suppose you do.
Ready
Did you make
filled.
the cakes? Did you make the birthday
God
cakes,
no.
Jane?
I made one
Mm.
for my elder daughter's first birthday. Nick and I stayed up half the ruddy night making it. Nearly got divorced, and it just looked like she wanted a birthday cake in the shape of a rabbit. I've still got a picture of it somewhere. It just looked so pathetic. I can't tell you. No, I'm not a great cake maker. Luckily, my younger daughter makes brilliant cakes and always has done. So she has to make all the birthday cakes. She's absolute whiz at it. No, I'm a terrible cake maker. You're pretty good at cakes, aren't you?
Oh no, I'm hopeless. Oh, I'm dreadful.
Oh,
Oh, I'm absolutely dreadful. But it is a great gift, isn't it? If you have that, like
yeah,
your younger daughter does, she has a great gift, and I think what is it? How it's magic that you can
yeah.
create all these wonderful. It was Jane Asher who started all that off. Do you remember years
Oh,
ago?
Jane Asher.
Actress Jane Asher, and she used to be on the television, then did all these wonderful
Oh,
cakes, party cakes. Fantastic, fantastic. No, I never made them. No, they were always bought or provided for by the venue, which you're chosen to have the party really.
yeah.
Um,
No, mine were provided for by the supermarket, who
yeah.
managed to do cake very much better than I could ever manage it
Oh, indeed,
at a fraction of the
indeed,
cost. So
indeed. And the thing is, you had to be very careful, didn't you, with those early children parties to make sure that you were inside. You didn't want to be in open spaces because then you could lose them, couldn't you?
oh God, yes,
Suddenly Charlie's disappeared and you don't know where he's gone.
yeah.
I learned that lesson very quickly. Um,
Yeah, playing hide and seek out in the park, not a great plan.
not,
There's
not
there's two of them still there. Feral in the woods.
yes. Oh my goodness, can you imagine? Imagine. But so different from our own children's parties, it
Yeah.
used to be more, pass the parcel, musical chairs and all
Musical
that. Oh, it's
bumps.
moved on. It's musical bumps. It's all moved on since then.
I don't think I would know where to get a blancmange rabbit now.
No. Chocolate fingers. I remember little chocolate fingers.
That was a great treat.
Mm,
Yeah. Okay. Well,
yeah.
look, we're just getting into cake nostalgia now, aren't we?
We are really.
It's
Yes.
poor. We should probably go and eat something healthy.
Yes, it's made me feel a bit hungry actually.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to nip round the corner and get a box of iced party rings and remember celebrate my youth as it was.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, Ducky.
Yeah, go and enjoy your party fare,
Thank you.
and so will I. I'm going to
All
make
right.
myself a little jam sandwich in the shape of a little hedgehog or something like that. That'll keep
brilliant.
me going all day. Draw.
Take care. Bye.
Thanks for listening to our One Stiletto in the Grave podcast. If you'd like to see behind-the-scenes clips and bonus content, please visit our Facebook page, One Stiletto in the Grave podcast. And if you'd like to ask any questions, follow us on Twitter at OneStiletto65. This podcast is produced by Raggedy House Productions and the music composed by Tom Smith. See you next time!